Well, let's talk a little bit about Mirror Girl. So, the first line of your biography currently is I'm a mixed race writer. Why is that the first line? Why is it important for you to make that distinction?
So I am an interesting segment of my racial identity, where I am light enough to pass for white. My mother is Black, my father is Norwegian. It's like the mix. My brother could not pass for white, but as the cards fell, I can. And so, in terms of figuring out what art I want to make and how I want to speak in the world, I don't just identify it as a Black writer or a white writer. It felt like that mixed race space was where I was really coming from. And for Agnes, I think you can kind of see some of the themes that are important, that have to do with mixed race identity. The idea of like inside and outside and trying to find your place in the world, trying to solidify like maybe a contested identity. But Mirror Girls is my first book that really looks at it sort of head on. There are mixed race characters and a Black character in Agnes as well. But feminism was sort of the main theme that I was looking on at the time. And I think, in terms of like looking at that mirror, there were ways that I was trying to sort out identity issues too. Mirror Girls is really specifically about mixed race identity, and particularly mixed race identity in the 1950s Jim Crow South. So it's a story of twin sisters, one of whom is light enough to pass for white, and the other who is obviously Black, who are separated at birth after the murder of their parents. Charlie, who lives a life as a Black girl, is whisked away to Harlem by her grandmother after this murder. But Magnolia, who's the light-skinned child, is kept down south and raised as the heiress to a cotton plantation in Georgia. And she's told nothing about her racial heritage. But there are ghostly and supernatural forces at work that bring these sisters together again in Georgia. And they have to learn, can they fix what's been broken at this point? Can they be sisters again? Can they bridge those gaps? And Magnolia also importantly has to ask herself, who am I? Because at that time, you couldn't be a mixed race girl. That was not an option. It was the rule was one drop of Black blood makes you Black. So her entire community was going to ostracize her if she decided that she was going to be a Black girl. And it's not a spoiler, this happens pretty early. That's the decision that she makes, to try and find her sister, to try to be with her sister and build a life with her. But yeah, so that's the second book that I had up.
It's lots of questions about Mirror Girls. Occurs to me, I'm I don't know if you could tell here on the screen. I'm Caucasian. My wife is African American, and we were dating for a while, and we got married shortly after Barack Obama became president because it's a new America. Thank God! We don't have to worry about the past so much anymore. That's and now, of course, Senator Mike Brown of Indiana, noted scumbag for a number of reasons, but would like to make our marriage federally illegal, as would many other conservative fellows. So the past isn't the past; it's not even past, as they say. And I've read elsewhere that you said that that as a writer of color, the emotions and grief that I feel, I've been just pouring into this manuscript. So what about our current age? I know I've heard you talk elsewhere about George Floyd's murder in particular was heavy on your mind as you're writing about this. What made Mirror Girls the vehicle for you to synthesize all of these feelings that you were having?
Well, Mirror Girls, it's like above all like a family story. It's the story of how are these sisters who were separated for so long going to find their way back to each other, and can they even be a family? Which goes to those questions of like sort of illegal marriages and like, can they even be a family in that situation? My family growing up, we had some problems with being taken seriously as a complete unit and as a family. We grew up mostly in California and Arizona, and people had a real sort of gut level problem with the way that we presented. So like if I was at the grocery store with my father and my brother, people would say, well, how nice that he adopted my brother. And the poor kid, like he had nightmares actually for many years that he was adopted and not part of our family. But if I was with my mother, well, then she must be the nanny. And so these kind of assumptions that color brings up in people and the ways that people feel they need to immediately understand everything about you and categorize you. There's an anger and like a level of intensity to that I really wanted to examine, especially as we were in a moment that really felt like a shocking kind of backlash to where I thought we'd made progress, where I thought that we had that we weren't going to be, in California with my family, we had Rodney King, and it felt like then we had Obama, as you said, it felt like we had sort of moved forward, but in fact, we were kind of, there's always something else that comes back. And we had George Floyd, and it felt like we were trapped in this kind of spiral, this circle, and that particularly these families were never going to be able to have a place where they could be considered a family and taken seriously as a family. And so those ideas of like separation and segregation were really important to me. There's like another little bit that you might have seen elsewhere, but this stuff, it goes so deep, and it goes so deep into all of our families that are sort of mixed race. But when my mother gave birth to me in Maryland, she actually almost lost me that day. She had a C-section, and a nurse took me away for some sort of a test or a check. And when the nurse came back with a brown baby boy, and even though they had different wristbands, they had different names, it was just in her mind, this light-skinned child could not belong with my mother. And so she tells a story about how she had to get up out of bed and holler for me and track me down. And in that sort of moment of fear, she kind of knew what it would be like sometimes to try to be our type of family, sort of an uphill battle, fight against the wave. So a lot of that, like, I wanted to work through the story, and I didn't want to set it in a contemporary time. I wanted to set it sort of at the moment that I felt a lot of these problems had really began, which was that Jim Crow segregation idea, that separate but equal sort of ancient lie that is one of the ways that our society was kind of like split down the middle. And so facing that color line was, I think, an important plot mechanic for me to sort of bring out some of these themes and these stories about belonging and sort of how we exist together as a mixed race community.
I trying to think what's a good follow-up question to that, other than I certainly, unfortunately, can relate somewhat, just because my son, depending on when in his development you check, has been multiple skin tones, continuing to change and to find whatever it's going to be is ultimate. But very early on, he was a spitting image of me, and so my wife would take him with her to go shopping, and people, total strangers in Barack Obama's America, would walk up to her and say, "Whose child is that?" It's like, well, who do you care? It's mind your business. Go shop. But that's within the last decade that unfortunately is still very much with us.
And that question, like, what do you care? That's like the heart of it. That's like what we all need to sort of know, like, why are people policing other people's families? That's the really scary thing. And that's where there's so much danger, danger of like being separated. That's such a nightmare. I'm sorry that happens to you guys too.
Wow. I mean, there was a Cheerios commercial with an interracial family 2 years ago, and the internet absolutely lost its mind every time they recast a superhero as a character of a different race. People go nuts as though it was all fine and realistic until you change that. That was the most important part. Jim Gordon can't be Jeffrey Wright. This is now the whole Batman mythos becomes somewhat unrealistic. Oh, you think? Just absolute madness that hopefully we'll see some more improvement on in our lifetime. Would be nice. But one thing you had mentioned earlier that has struck me as well is this idea of people having certain beliefs, cult-like beliefs around not just religion, but around around race, around society, around different people's roles. I critiqued some fiction for an extremely conservative person. And I did it because it was kind of a trial run for I've got some family members that I have not been speaking to. And at some point, I have to just find a way to possibly talk to them, or maybe not. I still haven't decided for certain how I'm going to handle that. But this was my trial run. And what I noticed with this person's writing is that it was consistent across the board. It was not just people of different races, people who don't believe the way this person believes. Like across the board, it was cartoonish versions of almost every person in their life to the point where well, maybe this is just a problem of the world being unconsidered for so many people, that you haven't had to develop empathy, that you haven't had to think, what would it be like to be in this person's shoes? And I don't know what we do about that. I want to say continue to produce art, but there's a lot of art in the world, and these problems persist. What do you think we do?
I mean, that's a great question. I'm sort of in my next book, which is called, the one that is just finishing up and will be out in May, is more focused on sort of activism and what do we do when it just feels like we've been doing so much and not getting necessarily as far as we'd like, although we have gotten quite far when you look back to, where we really started. It's been scary lately because we make the art, but then people ban the art. So then the kids can't get access to it. And that is like, has been a shocking and disheartening turn of events. And we'll see where that goes. But Mirror Girls as a story was very much focused on how do you internally continue to survive in a world that wants to tell you that your family is not a legitimate family and that you are less than someone else because of the color of your skin, or that you can't belong with certain people. And my characters sort of are trying to get in touch with, like, what is the type of inner strength? What is the belief in that something that's greater than you, similar to AGNES, that allows you to keep moving through a world like that? And so I think that part of the question, we answer internally, but then in terms of how do we affect this external world? How do we try to change things so that the world isn't sending us these messages and harming our children in these ways? I did try to write a book more about activism. And this book is called Your Plantation Prom is Not Okay. And it's a story told by a girl named Harriet, who's been raised on a plantation turned enslaved people's museum in modern day Louisiana. And she's a TikTok activist by the end of the book, because she's tired of people coming to these plantations to throw parties, to throw weddings. She feels like she's been, screaming that this is wrong for so many years. Her community has been screaming that this is wrong, and nobody is listening. And so that's exactly the problem that she tries to confront, is, well, how do we get people to listen? And unfortunately, I wish that I could say she found like a really easy answer that was not as difficult as it turned out to be. And I tried to make these answers easier, but the way it worked out in the story was like, we just have to keep doing the one foot in front of the other. We have to keep saying the thing that's true. And we have to keep hoping that eventually the wind will turn and people will start to hear. And the thing is, it's hard, we're never going to see linear progress. Like, that is definitely something that we learned going through Obama. We're going to see eddies and swirls, and we're going to see one step forward, two steps back, but we're not seeing no movement. And the important thing is like that we keep speaking. I don't know if that helps, but that's sort of like definitely something that I think about a lot and that I'm trying to kind of work through with my fiction too.
Of course, the alternative is we could all just go live in a cabin in the woods and pretend that the rest of the world's not there.
Exactly. Or break off into these super separate communities that have nothing to do with each other. And, of course, though, for families like ours, that's not an option. There's going to be, a foot in both places. And so you can't just, you know, it's too late for a Marcus Garvey solution.
But we live here, so we're going to have to do the best we can.